In Lagos, they say if a house is too cheap, you are paying with your soul. We all know how hard it is to find a decent apartment in this city. The agents will show you a rat hole and call it a palace. So when I found the compound at number 16, Abiola Street, I thought God had finally answered my prayers. It was a beautiful story building, 4 flats, 2 upstairs, 2 downstairs. The walls were painted a fresh, bright yellow, and the gate was solid black iron. There was a borehole with running water, and the compound was paved with interlocking stones. But the best part was the rent. It was suspiciously low. In this area, a 2-bedroom flat goes for 2 million naira a year. But the landlord, an old man named Baba Solank, only asked for 300,000. There was just one strange condition. He did not want a 1-year payment. He did not want 2 years. He only accepted payment for 3 months. He said he wanted to see if we were good tenants first. I should have run away then. I should have asked why a landlord in Lagos would turn down money. But I was desperate. I was tired of squatting with friends. So I paid the money. I moved into the ground floor flat, flat 3. The apartment was spacious. The sitting room was massive, tiled with expensive white ceramic tiles that gleamed under the bulb light. But from the very first night, the room felt heavy. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and you feel like someone is standing right behind you? That is how the sitting room felt. It was always cold, even when the Lagos heat was suffocating outside. The first week was quiet, too quiet. My neighbors were strange. There was a woman in flat 2, Mama Chinedu. She never came out. Her curtains were always drawn. When I greeted her at the tap, she would just nod and hurry back inside, clutching her Bible like a weapon. The tenants upstairs were the same. No loud music. No generator noise. Everyone walked on tiptoes. It was as if they were afraid of waking someone up. But who? It started on a Tuesday night. I was sleeping in my bedroom, but the heat was unbearable, and my fan had stopped working. So I took my mattress and dragged it into the sitting room. The tiles were cool against my skin. I lay there, scrolling through my phone, enjoying the silence. Then I heard it. It was faint at first. A rhythmic sound. Thump, thump, thump. I sat up. I thought it was someone knocking on the front gate. I waited. The sound stopped. I lay back down, placing my ear against the pillow on the floor. Thump, thump, thump. My heart went cold. The sound wasn't coming from the gate. It wasn't coming from the wall. It was coming from underneath me. It was coming from inside the floor. I scrambled off the mattress, shining my torchlight on the tiles. They looked perfect, white, clean, unbroken. I told myself I was crazy. Maybe it was a rat in the plumbing. Maybe it was the soak-away pit rumbling. But rats don't knock with a rhythm. I didn't sleep in the sitting room that night. I went back to the sweating heat of my bedroom. The next morning I saw Baba Solank in the compound. He was sweeping the interlocking stones. He was a small man, always wearing a white native attire that looked a little bit too big for him. He stopped sweeping when he saw me. He had this smile, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good morning, my son," he rasped. "Hope you are enjoying the flat?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, Baba, but I heard some sounds last night." From the floor, his smile didn't change, not even a little bit. "Old houses make sounds, my son. The earth settles. Do not let your imagination trouble you." He went back to sweeping, but as I walked away I felt his eyes drilling into my back. 2 weeks passed. The 3-month clock was ticking. I started to notice things about the compound that I missed before. I noticed that the "To Let" sign was never fully taken down. It was just turned around. I noticed that the neighbors were packing bags, little by little. One evening I caught Mama Chinadu outside. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red, and she had lost weight. "Mama," I whispered, looking around to make sure Baba Solank wasn't there. "Why is everyone so quiet here? Why does everyone leave so soon?" She grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Her hands were trembling. "You have been here almost 1 month," she whispered. "Have they started singing yet?" I froze. "Singing? Who?" "The ones on the floor," she said, her voice barely audible. "The tenants who didn't leave." She let go of me and ran inside her flat before I could ask more. That night I understood what she meant. It was 3 a.m. exactly. I was awake. I couldn't sleep. A song for the dead. I grabbed my machete. I am a man, I told myself. I will not be chased out of my own house by ghost stories. I walked into the sitting room. The temperature dropped 10 degrees instantly. The room was freezing, and the singing, it was loud now. It was vibrating through the soles of my feet. Gabami-o, Gabami-o, save me, save me. The voices were crying out. I looked at the center of the room. The white tiles seemed to be sweating. Water was seeping up through the grout lines. But it wasn't clear water. It was dark, reddish-brown, like old blood mixed with mud. I backed away, terrified. The singing got louder, rising in pitch, turning into a wailing scream. It wasn't one person. It was many men, women, children, all crying from beneath the concrete slab. "Where did you go last night?" he asked. He wasn't smiling anymore. "I went to see a friend," I lied. He stared at me for a long time. "You must sleep in the house," he said darkly. "The house protects you. If you leave before your 3 months are up, you break the covenant." "What covenant?" I asked, my voice shaking. "The agreement," he said. "The house needs life to keep standing. If you leave, you must find a replacement." Or, he didn't finish the sentence. He just unlocked the gate and let me in. I went into my flat to pack, but when I got inside, I saw it. The sitting room floor. The tiles in the center of the room had cracked, a long, jagged crack running right down the middle. And from the crack, a smell was rising, a smell of rotting meat. I knew I had to see what was down there. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the spirit of Mama Chinadu's warning. Maybe it was the madness of the house. But I went to the kitchen and grabbed a hammer. I started smashing the tiles. Clang, crack, smash. Debris flew everywhere. I broke through the ceramic. I broke through the cement screening. I dug down into the foundation sand. And then I saw it. It wasn't just dirt. It was cloth. Ankara fabric, old and faded. I pulled at it. It was heavy. I dug frantically, my hands bleeding, my heart pounding in my throat. I cleared the sand away. It was a hand, a human hand, preserved in the dry sand of the foundation, and on the finger was a wedding ring. I scrambled back, vomiting on the floor. It wasn't just one body. Suddenly the front door slammed shut. The lock clicked. I turned around. The singing started again. But this time it wasn't coming from the floor. It was coming from the walls. It was coming from the ceiling. And then I heard the key turn in the lock. I turned around. The singing started again. But this time it wasn't coming from the floor. It was coming from the walls. It was coming from the ceiling. And then I heard the key turn in the lock. Baba Solank was standing there. He was holding a calabash in one hand and a heavy iron rod in the other. Behind him were two large men who looked like they were carved out of stone. "You are too curious," Baba sighed. "The others usually wait until the 90th day, but you are impatient." He took a step toward me. "We have a vacancy in the foundation," he said. "Right there in the sitting room. It is the perfect size for you." I backed away until my heels touched the edge of the hole I had dug. The smell of the rotting corpses was rising up behind me, choking me. But the smell of death coming from Baba Solank was stronger. The two men behind him stepped into the light. They were huge. They wore dirty jeans and tight black singlets. Their eyes were glazed over, empty, like they were high on something strong, or maybe under a spell. In Lagos, you learn to fear men like this. Men who have no soul left to lose. "Baba," I stammered, holding the hammer in front of me with a shaking hand. "Baba, take the money. I will leave. I won't tell anyone." Baba Solank laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound, like stepping on dry twigs. He dipped his fingers into the calabash he was holding and flicked a black powder toward me. "Money?" he scoffed. "Do you think I built this compound for rent money? The rent is just bait. The real wealth comes from the exchange." He took a step closer. The room felt like it was spinning. "You see," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, "the spirits of the earth are hungry. They give me long life. They give me power. But every 90 days their energy fades. They need a recharge, fresh blood. A new tenant to sing for them." He nodded to the thugs. "Seize him." The first thug lunged at me. I swung the hammer blindly. It connected with his shoulder with a sickening crunch of bone. He grunted, stumbling back, but he didn't scream. He didn't even look in pain. It was unnatural. He just shook his head and came at me again. The second thug grabbed my arm, twisting it until I dropped the hammer. He threw me against the wall. My head cracked against the plaster. I slid down, dazed. The room was swimming in front of my eyes. They dragged me toward the hole in the center of the room, toward the exposed bones and the rotting fabric. "Please," I screamed. "Jesus, somebody help me." Baba Solank began to chat. It was a language I didn't understand, old and guttural. As he chanted, the singing from the floor got louder. "Gabami-o, Gabami-o." But this time the voices weren't just sad. They were angry. The floorboards vibrated. The windows rattled in their frames. The hole I had dug seemed to widen on its own, the sand shifting and sliding. Suddenly a wind blasted out of the hole. It was cold enough to freeze water. It hit Baba Salank squarely in the chest, blowing his white agbada back. The candle in the calabash flickered and died. Darkness swallowed the room. For a second there was total confusion. In the dark the singing became a shriek. I felt the grip of the thug loosen on my arm as he stumbled in the blackness. This was my chance. I kicked out with all my strength, aiming for where I thought the thug's leg was. My boot connected with a kneecap. He howled finally, a human sound. I scrambled on my hands and knees, crawling toward the kitchen. I knew the layout of the flat by heart. I heard the iron rod crash onto the tiles right where my head had been a second ago. Catch him. Do not let him spoil the ritual. Baba Salank screamed in the dark. I reached the kitchen door. I pulled myself up and ran for the back door. It was locked. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so bad I dropped them. I could hear heavy footsteps coming closer. I didn't have time for the keys. I grabbed a heavy cast iron pot from the stove and smashed it against the kitchen window. The glass shattered outward. I didn't care about the jagged shards. I dove through the window, tearing my shirt, cutting my arms. I landed hard on the concrete outside, rolling into the dirt of the backyard. It was raining now, a heavy Lagos downpour that drowned out the sound of my breathing. I scrambled to my feet. I was out of the flat, but I was still inside the compound. The fence was 10 feet high, topped with broken bottles and razor wire. The only way out was the main gate. I ran toward the front of the house. The rain was cold, mixing with the blood on my arms. As I rounded the corner, I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. Mama Chinedu's door was open. She was standing in her doorway, illuminated by a flickering candle. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the main house. She was holding a large kitchen knife. "Mama," I whispered, "we have to run. They are killing people." She turned to look at me. Her face was pale, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Run?" she whispered. "There's nowhere to run, my son." "The gate?" "Try the gate." I ignored her despair and sprinted to the big black gate. I pulled the bolt. It slid back easily. I pushed the gate. It wouldn't move. I pushed harder, slamming my shoulder against it. It felt like I was pushing against a mountain. I looked closely at the hinges. They weren't welded shut. They weren't locked. But there was a thick red string tied across the handles. A charm. "I told you," Mama Chinedu's voice came from behind me. She had walked out into the rain. "You cannot leave on the 90th night. The compound is sealed. There has to be a way." I shouted, looking around frantically. Behind us, the door to my flat banged open. Baba Salank stepped out into the rain. The 2 thugs were behind him, holding flashlights. The beams cut through the rain, searching for us. "There he is," one of them shouted. I looked at Mama Chinedu. "Mama, please. If we fight together." She shook her head slowly. Then she did something that haunts me to this day. She raised the knife she was holding, but she didn't point it at the landlord. She pointed it at me. "I am sorry," she sobbed. "My 3 months are up next week. Baba said, he said if I give him a substitute, if I stop you from leaving, he will let me stay for another year. He will let me live." I stared at her in horror. It was a trap within a trap. The tenants weren't just victims. They were pitted against each other. "Mama, no," I pleaded. "Get him," Baba Salank commanded. The thugs started running toward us. Mama Chinadu lunged at me with a knife. I sidestepped, grabbing her wrist. She was weak, frail from fear and guilt. I didn't want to hurt her. I pushed her away, and she fell into the mud, sobbing hysterically. I had nowhere to go. The gate was sealed. The thugs were closing in. The neighbor had betrayed me. I looked up. The generator house. It was a small concrete shed near the fence. The roof was low enough to climb, and from there I might be able to jump over the razor wire. It was suicide, but staying here was death. I sprinted toward the shed. "Cut him off," Baba yelled. One thug ran to the left, flanking me. I didn't stop. I jumped, grabbing the edge of the generator house roof. My fingers slipped on the wet concrete. I clawed desperately, kicking my legs. A hand grabbed my ankle. I looked down. The thug had me. He grinned, his teeth yellow in the darkness. He pulled hard. I held on for dear life. I kicked him in the face with my other foot. He grunted and let go for a second. That was all I needed. I pulled myself up onto the roof. I stood up, balancing on the slippery zinc. I looked at the top of the fence. The razor wire was rusty and sharp. "Come down," Baba Salak shouted from below. "You cannot escape destiny." I looked back at the house, and then I saw it. In the window of my flat, the flat I had just escaped, there were people standing there. Not the thugs, not the landlord. They were translucent, pale. They were watching me. The singing had stopped. They were just watching. And then one of them, a small boy, raised his hand and pointed. Not at me, but at the ground near the gate. I looked where he was pointing. The soak-away pit. The concrete slab covering the pit was cracked, and bubbling up from the crack was that same black smoke I saw earlier. I realized then that the spirits weren't just trapped. They were waiting for a door to open, and I had opened the door in the sitting room. I looked down at Baba Salank. "Your foundation is broken, Baba," I shouted over the rain. I turned and leaped toward the fence. I didn't aim for the clear patch. I aimed for the tree branch hanging over from the next compound. I flew through the air. The razor wire caught my leg, slicing through my jeans, cutting deep into my calf. I screamed in agony, but my hands caught the branch. I swung wildly, the wood cracking under my weight. I let go and fell into the neighbor's compound. I hit the ground hard. The pain in my leg was blinding, but I was out. I was on the other side of the wall. I lay there in the mud, gasping for air, listening. On the other side of the wall, inside number 16, I heard a scream. But it wasn't me, and it wasn't Mama Chinadu. It was Baba Solunk. And following the scream was the sound of 1,000 voices singing loud and triumphant. "Gabami-o! Gabami-o!" I didn't wait to hear what happened next. I dragged myself through the mud, crawling toward the street lights. I crawled until my hands touched the cold asphalt of the main road. My leg was burning like fire, the blood mixing with the rainwater in the gutter. I remember seeing the headlights of a passing Keek neighbor. I remember waving my hand weakly. And then I remembered darkness. I woke up 2 days later in a general hospital. The smell of antiseptic was strong, but it couldn't mask the phantom smell of rotting earth that was still stuck in my nose. My leg was stitched up. The doctor told me I had lost a lot of blood. He asked if I had been attacked by armed robbers. I told him the truth. I told him about the house, about the bodies in the floor, about the landlord who fed tenants to the foundation. He looked at me with pity. He didn't write anything down. He just patted my shoulder and said, "Thank God you are alive." In Lagos, we don't ask too many questions about spiritual matters. It is better to just forget. Forget? How could I forget? The police were even worse. When I went to the station a week later, limping on my crutches, the DPO laughed. "You say your landlord is a ghost? You say he eats people? Young man, go and pay your rent and stop smoking loud." They wouldn't investigate. They wouldn't even go to the address. I was on my own, but I had to know. I had to know if Baba Solank was dead. I had to know if Mama Chinadu survived. 3 weeks after the escape, I gathered enough courage to go back to Abiola Street. I went in the afternoon, when the sun was high and bright, because shadows are shorter in the day. I stood across the street from number 16. The gate was closed. The compound was silent. The jagged glass on the top of the fence where I had escaped had been repaired. It looked cleaner, newer. I walked to the small provision shop opposite the house. The woman selling there, Mama Toby, was arranging bread on her shelf. I bought a bottle of Coke just to make conversation. "Mama," I asked casually, "is the landlord of number 16 around?" "I am looking for an apartment." She stopped what she was doing. She looked at me, squinting. She didn't recognize me. To her, I was just another desperate tenant. "You want to rent there?" she asked, lowering her voice. "Don't bother. The house is under new management." "New management?" I asked. "What happened to Baba Solank?" She hissed and clapped her hands. You didn't hear? It was a big story in the street. 3 weeks ago, during that heavy rain, nobody saw him again. He just vanished. His car is still there. His clothes are still there. But the man? Gone. My blood ran cold, vanished. "And the tenants?" I asked. "There was a woman, Mama Chinadu?" The shop woman shook her head. "That one? She moved out the next morning. She was carrying heavy bags. She looked like she had seen a ghost. She didn't even say goodbye to anyone. She just ran, so she survived. Or maybe she just escaped to carry the guilt somewhere else." "But here is the strange thing," Mama Toby continued, leaning closer over the counter. "The new caretaker. He came the very next day. He said Baba Solank traveled to the village. He renovated the whole ground floor. They laid new tiles. Beautiful Italian tiles. I dropped the bottle of Coke. It shattered on the floor, foaming around my shoes. New tiles. They didn't find Baba Solank because he never left the house. The singing I heard that night, the scream. The spirits didn't just chase him. They pulled him in. He had broken the covenant. He let a tenant escape. The foundation needed a replacement. And since he couldn't give them me, the house took him instead. I looked back at the house. The sun was shining on the yellow paint. It looked innocent. It looked welcoming. And then I saw it. The gate opened. A young man and his pregnant wife walked out. They were holding a receipt. They looked happy, relieved. The caretaker walked them to the gate. He was a tall man, wearing a sharp suit. But when he turned to wave at them, I saw his eyes. They were cold, empty. "Thank you, sir," the young husband said, shaking the caretaker's hand. "We really appreciate the price. 3 months is very reasonable for us to settle down." 3 months. The cycle hadn't ended. It had just reset. Baba Solank was gone, but the hunger of the house remained. He was probably down there right now, beneath the new Italian tiles, waiting for the cement to set around his chest, waiting to join the choir. I wanted to run across the street. I wanted to shake the young man. I wanted to scream. Don't do it. Run away. The floor is hungry, but I didn't. I couldn't move. Fear paralyzed me. If I went back there, if I stepped on that soil again, I knew the house would never let me leave a second time. So I watched them get into a taxi and drive away, dreaming of their new home. I turned around and walked away. I walked until my leg throbbed. I walked until I was far away from Abiola Street. I live in a boys' quarter now, in a wooden structure on stilts. I don't touch concrete floors anymore, and every night before I sleep I put on headphones. I play loud music. I play sermons. I play anything to drown out the silence, because sometimes when the city is quiet, if I listen too closely to the ground, I can still hear a new voice in the choir, a raspy old voice crying out from the deep. Kabami-o, Kabami-o. So, my friend, this is my story. You can call it fiction if it helps you sleep at night. You can say it is just a Nollywood script, but if you are house hunting in Lagos, and you find a beautiful house with beautiful tiles for a price that is too good to be true, do me a favor, put your ear to the ground and listen, because the rent might be cheap, but the service charge is your life.